America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and I will tell you I did not pick the emergence of the woke right on my 2025 bingo card. I did not understand that to be the case, but I think it's going to be very important because, remember, MAGA wasn't always about illegal immigration. They said they were always about illegal immigration, but they were just about immigration in general. And one reason why you're against illegal immigration is because you don't want open borders. You want to be able to check everybody who comes into your democracy according to the checklist of your choosing. But you don't want people to, of themselves, choose to be in your country. You want to be able to choose to govern who is in your country. So the problem with illegal immigration wasn't just legal versus illegal. It was about who gets to choose who gets to be here. And so that's why it's also going to be a matter for legal immigration. Illegal immigration was just low-hanging fruit. The real battle is going to be about immigration and who we let in our country, because once you're a member of our country, it's not a place for second-class citizenship, really. You become a factor in our lives. You become a factor in our property holdings insofar as you might inflate or deflate our property value. You become a factor in our high schools insofar as you might lower the scores of our high school, or you might take the valedictory spot that would have gone to some other kid. Like, you become a factor in American lives in a way that it's not just about one aspect of your being. It's not just that you come here as a worker. Depending on who you talk to, you become a draw on our resources. So immigration was always about Americans deciding who gets to be an American based on American values or through an American process. And now the question is, do companies get to decide who gets to be an American based on what companies need? And let's defend companies. Let me steelman, as the phrase goes, the argument. Markets are institutions of freedom. And as I run a firm, if I am to run a firm in a free nation, I should be able to run the firm as I see fit. And as I see fit means using the property and technology I see fit. So I don't want government telling me which technology I should use. That means, using the processes I see fit. That means using the employees I see fit. If I am to be free, I should have the right to use employees as I see fit. And I happen to like those employees over there. So if you tell me that I can't use my employees for my business who happen to have been born over there, you're abridging my freedom. If you're saying I have to pick from this narrow pool of employees, the American employees, that is abridging my freedom as a market actor, as a capitalist. And you're just being a communist, saying you're narrowing my pool of people I can pick to run the business as I see fit, because part of what it is for me to be free is for me to run the business as I see fit. Right? So that's the strong argument for employers, American employers, getting to pick which employees they use and being able to deploy them as the employers see fit. Right? Because the blessings of liberty in the Constitution are supposed to include all of our freedoms, and that includes the freedom to run my business as I see fit. So I hope that was clear. The problem is that is not the only freedom America provides, and it's not even the biggest one. And what I mean by that is that our market freedoms have to support our other qualities of freedom. For example, our freedom to own property, which is different than market freedom, because you can own property without being able to exchange it on the market. For example, passports and some land. There is, so there are lots of varieties of property that you are not fit for market consumption or not commodious, right? But they are still mine. Right, so we are still owners of our own property, insofar as we get to dispose of it as we feel. Freedom in families, we get to organize our families as we see fit. That is not a market freedom, but if market freedoms then impinge upon the way the struggles people have in order to secure their family as they see fit. You can see how the market becomes parasitic upon families, or if the market freedom wants you to work, 80 hours a week. And so far as, and that like disturbs how you want to do your family, then you have an example of the market then over determining your family life. So these are mutually reinforcing institutions of freedom that have to work together. Same with political freedom, right? One of the reasons I personally like the Iowa caucus, but people don't like the Iowa caucus, is you have to vote in front of your boss. Right? So I think in a well-ordered democracy, people would do more things in public. So you would have public arguments and public voting, and like they would be like the Iowa and Nevada caucuses. But people don't want those kind of caucuses for a few reasons. One of them is they don't want to have to vote in front of their boss because they're worried about their political behavior affecting their civil behavior. So we have the secret ballot instead. And, I'm a few minds of it, but that's the idea of how we need all of these different kinds of freedom, both political freedom and civil freedom. The boss has to be free to promote or fire you at will or as they see fit, including for your political whatever. But you need to be free to have political opinions and voice those political opinions without worrying about civil repercussions in an untoward way. So like we try to balance these out in a kind of thoughtful manner. Right? So our different varieties of freedom, we try to balance out in a thoughtful manner. So when a capitalist says, and, as a matter of their freedom, they have the right to say, I want to run my business as I see fit, and I want to run it for who I think can do this job the best. And that person's in, Calcutta, or that person's in Jakarta, or that person's in Seoul, and I want to bring them over here. And part of my American freedom is to be able to run my business as I see fit. So you should respect me being able to bring them here. That's a good argument until you could say that them bringing that person here causes problems for other aspects of other people's freedom. So how could that person, that engineer who comes to the United States with their family, become a problem for American freedom, and not just a good thing for Tesla's company, right? So that person comes here, they're not just a worker. They're also now an American. And since we don't believe in second-class citizenship, they're now we shouldn't believe in second-class citizenship. They're also now an American, which means they have the right to organize their family as they see fit. And they have the right to use all of our public institutions as they see fit. And that means now their kids, their souped up turbocharged kids, are now competing against your kids, which means you have to now adjust your culture to make sure that your kids can compete with their kids in a way that's, depending on the people in Northern California, there are people moving away from places where the Asians in Northern California reside, right? There was at the Fremont Union School District now is losing people because all of these H-1B high-performing Asian recent immigrants are moving in, and now the basic suburban white kids cannot compete, so they're moving to like Atherton or other places because they can't compete. And that's not the fault of the new Asians moving in, but for those people who don't want to have to move out or get out-competed in their own hometown because of new people coming in, they might feel some sort of way about the H-1B program. They don't want to get out-competed in their hometown. If someone was the valedictorian of their high school and they thought that they were setting up their kid to be the valedictorian of the high school, and they stayed in the same high school, but now for some reason that high school has become a tech hub, and all of these people who have a different culture and, depending on who you talk to, a more aggressive one, come here and they'll eat your kid's lunch, you could feel some sort of way about that. And maybe you are a little bit resentful that the nation's policy did not have your aspirations for your family in mind when when they thought about this policy, right? When they decide who your neighbors are and who's going to share your institutions and compete with you in your institutions and be a part of your institutions. Now, there's a lot at stake because the people coming in here are not just workers. They are also property owners. So now you have to talk about how housing values might inflate because of the communities of upper generation of high earning, highly skilled laborers who now come in and work. You could talk about how it's harder to organize unions. Because I actually think computer programmers need a guild system in a way that is not really tested for. It need a guild system and could actually profit from something like the AMA. Going into a computer program, but I'm going to need someone either in the chat or in the comments to talk more about that, because I haven't done quite enough research in it. But I do know that when Elon Musk takes his best and brightest from wherever he gets them from, he's not going to import union organizers among them. Like that's not something he's testing for, which would be a quality that if I'm going to design immigration policy, I don't want to bring in people who score well on tests but are anti-union. I don't think that's particularly good for the American culture, and it's consistent with our American values, because we do have a tradition, an American tradition of labor organizing. It's not great, but it is definitely American. It is definitely American. And if you're not testing for those, and at least as old as our tradition of standardized tests. So if you're testing, if you're deciding American values based on someone's test, but not American values and their fitness for this nation based on their penchant towards labor organizing, then you are your immigration policy is not consistent with our values in a way that I find unbecoming. Right? So this idea that it's benign to just bring over workers because they're just workers. No, they are not just workers. They are people with family, people who have institutions of their own, and people who then now we have to share institutions, share culture, and it's not just delicious food, but also we have to share opportunities with them and their kin. And we now have to have a culture that's organized around their culture, like in defense of their culture, because there's a reason why he went to, Calcutta and not Ohio. It's because the people in Calcutta had the culture that would, solve the problem that he wanted solved, and that in a way that would, be cheaper and easier for him. And that means that we now have to have a quality of culture that can compete with that culture. And I'm not sure that's a great American culture. I don't know. I don't want to work 80 hours a week and have my family. I want to be with my family. I want that to be part of my American culture. So we need to think about how we need to think about what it means to be an American and have our immigration policy be sensitive to that. Right? So the woke right, it's funny because they want meritocracy anytime whites have a strategic advantage, especially over black people, but they do not want meritocracy when other cultures have a strategic advantage over the whites. Because there are other cultures who have a strategic advantage over the whites. Especially white liberals. White liberals, they don't even... I'm always shocked when I find one who's good at anything. Anything hard. Because... anything hard takes a family input, and white liberals are such bad parents that anytime I find a white liberal excellent classical musician or a white liberal excellent mathematician or something, I'm always a little bit surprised, because that kind of excellence takes family, and they don't really believe in families in the way that they should, and takes hard work and a quality of discipline that's not really of the white liberal set. But we need to understand that you can't just have meritocracy without thinking about what it means to be an American, because that should define merit, not necessarily what one private firm needs for its own bottom line. That doesn't define merit. That might define merit for that firm, but that doesn't define merit for American immigration policy, because that is only one aspect of freedom, and we have to look at how those workers impact other Americans and in their participation in America and freedom, right? So, I mean, the great synthesis of this is like, look, American culture is not as serious as it should be about these fundamental issues in the new tech economy. So we need to build American institutions so that they meet these needs, and we can work with the titans of tech in order to make that happen. I think Georgia Tech does a pretty good job at this. But we just need to make it more of a national project to grow the engineers that we need. So we can admit that American culture isn't quite as serious at math and science as it should be in a way that's productive of our technological economy, and also say that we solve that problem not by going outside, but by like recommitting to our institutions with the help of private enterprise here. And and then we have to get serious about like, look, our engineers are not going to be like those other engineers. Our engineers are going to be unionized. Our engineers are going to be in a guild. Our engineers are going to be just as creative or whatever, but they're also going to have time with their family. And they're not going to have to decide whether to have time with their family or be in the guild or be an engineer, right? So we need to understand that American workers are American workers, and they're American first in all of the ways. And that's the same thing where we're talking about H-1Bs or H-2, the seasonal laborers. I think Americans can do that job. We can pick stuff too, but you're just going to have to pay us. You're just going to have to pay us, and that's just something we're going to have to work out as a nation about, like wage subsidies, or like, once again, union organizing is going to be very important. So like all of these real labor issues need to be solved in-house, because it's just as irresponsible to have an economy that depends on South Asian and East Asian programmers as it is to have an economy that depends on Saudi oil. And until we understand that, because there's a lot of like creative decisions and like capacities we need to build in home, and until we understand that and take that seriously, we're going to get run over by the fascists who just want to confuse their private firms' aims with America's aims. So when is the call-in show? Look, you guys need to give me more money for a call-in show. You get me after dark. And, this year I made a resolution with myself. I'm going to up my thumbnail game. So I learned how to do thumbnails, and I'll try to up my game a little bit. But everything takes time, and you need to pay me if you want time. You want my time and my quality of mind. All right. So once again, to reiterate the argument in general, markets are institutions of freedom. So the ability to hire and pick the talent I want for my firm is my ability to realize myself in the world, in existence, is ability to express myself and as self-determined and to be free. It's very important. I should be able to hire who I want to fit my needs as a matter of freedom. However, the people I hire are also Americans. Or the people I hire and bring here in America also become Americans and may impinge in their way of life on other Americans, right? They may raise property values, so it impinges on everyone else's right to be a property owner. They may suck up opportunities in our civil society. And since I believe if you watch this show, you should know that if you can't earn money, if you can't work in America, you're not really free. You're not free unless you have like a real job or a stream of income. So if America created enough jobs for Americans, and trained Americans to do the jobs that America needed done, then I would be a little bit more sanguine. I'd be a little bit okay with immigration and more open borders. But as it stands, what both on the low end and the high end, our globalist ethic produces is a lot of confusions about what we need in order to thrive in America as a sovereign nation. And I say the low end and the high end because I'm from California, and I swear I didn't see a white person mow a lawn until I was like 23, and I moved to the Midwest. So it's just confused about what we need as a nation to be sovereign and self-sufficient. And I'll say it again, it's just as unbecoming to be dependent on both illegal Latin American labor and legal, but still dicey East Asian and South Asian labor as it is to be dependent on Saudi oil. Like, we could go over there, see what they do in their culture, come back here and reform our institutions in a way that produced the same product, but in a way that was consistent with American values. And that means American values as a sovereign nation. And, like I said, labor organizing and unions, and like I said, a guild structure and all of these other forms of the American identity that and now so we get the same quality of engineering insight with an American sensibility, which I think is probably the best of both worlds, and it strengthens our nation, which we want. Someone says, Georgia Tech turned down my niece who received over $10 million in scholarships. She is now at Southern University, HBCU. She blew the ACT out of the water with highest score. So if she had a perfect score on the ACT, she would have gotten into Georgia Tech. I'll tell you right now. So the thing is, what you think of as blowing it out of the water is not that. Georgia Tech's a very competitive school. It's a good school. It's a very competitive school. I think more people should go on the Georgia Tech model. Like, other states should look at that and how Georgia built out its tech sector with schools like Georgia Tech, and especially with the Hope Scholarship and the Zell Scholarship. But if I'll tell you right now, if your niece really scored perfect on the ACT, she would be there. She would have gotten in. She did not score perfect on the ACT. And so she is fine. But I think this is one thing that, and I'll say this, Negro to Negro, those who were watching, Black people get confused. We think we value education, and because we care a lot about education, we know that it's a secret, but we don't know enough to value education. We don't even know what that means. I'll tell you two stories. One story is, and I've told this story before, but it's a very good story, so I'm going to say it again in this podcast. I was talking to a professor a few years ago, and we were both strategizing about our kids, and the professor was lamenting. The professor has 3 sons, and he was like, yeah, I know. The professor is also an Orthodox Jew. Orthodox Jewish professor. We were talking, Jew to Jew. I'm not Jewish, but you know what I mean. We were talking, and he was lamenting about his kids, and he was like, yeah, 2 of my boys did fine, but then one never finished his education. And I was always sad about that. And I was like, oh, that's too bad. And because I was talking about my kids, and I spent a lot of time. I pretty much teach my kids everything that they should know, which is what I think you should do. But I've talked about that in other videos. And my kids are now 12, 10, and 7. And, I spend a lot of time with them, and I'm always working on them, and always working with math, and always working with them. So I was talking with him, and he was lamenting his adult son. One of them didn't finish his education. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, that poor kid probably dropped out of high school. Not that big of a deal. I mean, that's too bad. This poor guy, the kid didn't finish his education, dropped out of high school. Come to find out, about 4 or 5 days later, that when my Orthodox Jewish friend said of his black sheep son who didn't finish his education, and the Orthodox Jewish guy feels like a failure, that means that his black sheep son did not complete his PhD. He's all but dissertation. He finished his master's, did not finish his PhD. He went to the University of Chicago, got a math degree, got this close to finishing his PhD, but then dropped out. So he's ABD. So, and that's what not completing his education means. So you have to understand that when you say serious about education and they say serious about education, we're talking about two different things. And I'm going to go into this more when I do a stronger culture show about how Vivek Ramaswamy was in a way right in his dragging, casting down, finger wagging at white culture in America. But when he talks about, like, when you talk about serious about education and they talk about serious about education, it's two different things. You would never call your child who has 2 degrees but is all but finished with their dissertation someone who never completed their education. That's not the way you would describe them. And you would not actually say that with seriousness. Right? So black people, we might care a lot about education, but we don't even know what that looks like. So our caring about it isn't really as effective as other people who might actually care about it less, but just do it better and have a stronger culture about it. So like, it's a little bit, it's a complicated thing. So I was also, and the second story I wanted to talk about with respect to the same issue was some white guy was lamenting, my daughter had a 1450 SAT and she didn't even get into a UC school. Oh, I think it was a guy. And he didn't even get into a UC engineering program. And they were just lamenting, going on and on about how their white son got a 1450 SAT. It should put him in the first percentile, 90 some odd percentile of SAT takers, and they didn't even get into the University of California engineering program. And now I went to the University of California, Berkeley, and I know a lot of engineers there. I know 4 of them who got perfect SATs. And this was back in the 90s. Right. And so UC Berkeley has not gotten less competitive, and UC Berkeley's engineering program has not gotten less competitive. So if you got a 1450, whatever, that just means you got a 750 math and a 700 verbal. Like, you're not getting in. Like, or if you can't get in, you can't be surprised when you don't get in, because the Berkeley engineering program, they're going to get people with 720 verbals and 780 maths. In fact, like, for a lot of schools, if you don't get a perfect math, they wonder if you even know math for a lot of the competitive schools. So it's like a numbers game. And you have to understand that, like, you don't even know what excellent is. And you can talk and you could tell and you could tell, yeah, they just don't know how competitive these schools are now. And they don't know what other families are like. All right, so black people, I'll tell you, I had to backwards engineer how to raise my kids, not from how I was raised. I was raised by a single nurse mom who did very well, but did not know what she did not know. I had to backwards engineer how to raise my kids from the kids I met at college. Because the difference in households is monstrous. What my kids can do and know at their age and their capacity is ridiculous relative to my own. Because I backwards engineered what a household should look like based on who I met at college at Berkeley, right? Not because I did like what my mom did to me. Like, my kids are not raised like I was raised. Not in any way. Barely. And my mom cared about it. It's just that, she was a product of a culture that told her the best thing she could do was work hard, take that extra shift, and then take that extra shift. But that left me being raised by television. So I learned a lot about what to do on watching The Fall Guy and MacGyver and all of that stuff. So that is what it is, but it's not, working with me, teaching me calculus in 8th grade like that. But that is what's happening in other households in the households that win. And I'm just telling you that caring a lot isn't the same as replicating that culture. As replicating the quality of culture. You just don't know what you don't know. So the person who thinks that the 1450 SAT score is high, it might be high in a different major. You might be able to get into a UC in a different major, in an arts major, or an humanities major, but in an engineering program, a 1450 is just like, it's good, but it's not, it's not great. All right, so someone asked, Army is half African, very important. I am, which saved me, because what I didn't get from backwards engineering, my colleagues, I had to get from remembering my African dad who got kicked out because he was too strict got kicked out of our house because he and my mom disagreed about how to parent us because he was too strict, right? So what are your thoughts about the discrepancies between African and Black immigrants' educational outcomes? It seems upper-class Nigerians have cracked the code to some degree. Well, you got to watch that, because if they're coming here and they're upper-class Nigerians, my dad was an upper-class Ghanaian. If they're coming here, they don't have the same kind of trauma and legacy of degradation as Black Americans. And then what you face here in America isn't the same. The big difference is lineage and family culture. The big difference is lineage and family, and what Jim Crow and then liberalism after that did to African-American descendants of slaves' family culture. Jim Crow overdetermined Black family life, although we don't talk about it like that, but it did. And then after the civil rights movement, you were thrown into liberalism, which and liberalism and feminism, that overdetermined Black family life in a way that, and market society in general, which told people that they could solve all of their problems by making more money. And you can't solve family problems by making more money. Institutions don't teach black kids. Black parents teach Black kids. The village does not teach Black kids. The village is made up of families, and families teach Black kids. So if you want Black kids to do well, you want Black families to do well. And so all of this kind of market-based was sold to well-meaning Black people who didn't know any better or weren't allowed to learn any better in Jim Crow, and then didn't know any better afterwards. And so, they thought institutions would do things that institutions don't do. School is not going to teach your kids how to read. You need to teach your kids how to read, Black people. School is not going to teach your kids how to do math. Not in a way that competes with the people in Calcutta. You need to teach your kid how to do math. Now, if you don't know how to do math, you need to learn also while you teach your kids how to do math. That's fine, but you need to understand, that you're fighting families. You're fighting families. Every time you see an Indian valedictorian or an Indian coder or whatever, you're fighting 2,000 years of Brahmins. You're fighting a caste system that train that kid how to step on other people and be comfortable doing it. You need to understand that that's what you're fighting. When you go against my kids, and if you go against my kids in anything, you're probably going to lose, because my kids have been trained by me. But you're not just going against them. You might just see them, but you're really going against my whole mind that I've trained in putting it into them. So it's not an individual work ethic or individual merit that wins these things. You're fighting families. You're fighting families. And that's what neoliberalism actually doesn't talk to you about. It doesn't take away the government from the market. What it does is empower families to rule under the guise of individualism. Right? So black families are a bit of a disaster until we admit that. That's a problem. But they're not a bit of a disaster because we don't care enough, or they're a bit of a disaster because they were targeted. And that's one reason why, we're owed reparations. But that's a different that's a different topic, right? So you answered your own question. Upper class Nigerians have the same resources, insider info, and class status to succeed in American academia. That's true. That's true. It is true. It's a little bit weird because they still feel out of place in a way. Because like you go to Berkeley and you're East Asian, you're going to find like a lot of East Asians, right? So like it's a little bit 1 foot, 1 out if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out if you're an upper class African or African. But you're not dealing with the same sort of family degradation, family confusion. No one, like if you think, like I said, the confusion with thinking that a 33 is killing the ACT. A 33 is a good score. 36 is killing the ACT. 35 is doing very well. But if you have lower than a 35, you probably shouldn't talk about your ACT score. like you don't know. You think you did well, but unless you have a 35 or a 36, you did not do well. You just took the test and you need to just kind of keep your mind out. But like, if you don't have that kind of sensibility, then you're confused. If you didn't get over a 1500 on your SAT, you did not do very well on the SAT. You did pretty well. After a 1550, you can start like bringing up your SAT scores. But if you didn't get over 1500, you're not entitled to get in anywhere. You just quietly get in where you get in, and it'll be good, and are happy about that. But you don't know that if everyone around you got a 1200. You only know that if you're around enough MIT engineers and you realize everybody in this room got a 1550. Right? So like, it's not that black people or even Americans don't want to be excellent or don't care about excellence. And you don't know what excellence is. Like, you don't know it. Like, it's a matter of knowledge and not even a matter of hard work. Right? So if like you go to a spelling bee, if your kid's in a spelling bee and your kid like likes to spell and they're good at spellers, and then they walk into a spelling bee and get creamed by this Indian American family, you're just thinking, or this Indian American kid, you're just thinking, oh, that kid is a better speller than my kid. You don't know that it's an entire family project for that kid. And there are entire junior networks of spelling bee minor leagues that kid has been fighting through for the last 2 years to get to your kid. You just think that everybody is like your kid and just kind of plays and just kind of likes doing it and worked hard and practiced on their own. And so you think everyone else is like that, but they're not. They're not like that, right? It's actually like the rec league fundamental basketball is actually a pretty good analogy. A lot of the NBA players now are second generation players because you have to have a lot of fundamental habits, from footwork to shooting form. There's a lot of things that you profit from being the child of a professional football player, not just genetically, but also just in terms of habits and footwork and practicing and aspirations, right? So you can be a very athletic, work hard. You got these YouTube videos of like these Africans like tying tires to their back and doing all this hard work, but they're still not going to make it because they don't have the fundamentals. It's not going to be about hard work. It's going to be about direction, coaching, and that everyday thing that an NBA dad can do for you that the lack of an NBA dad isn't going to do for you. And so you're getting a lot of second generation NBA players, not because they love the game more, but they just have the family that's built for being a professional athlete in a way that other people don't have the family that's built for them being a professional athlete. So I hope it makes it clear that American culture shouldn't have to compete with non-American culture. We should learn from non-American culture and then incorporate the aspects of non-American culture that we need in America into like all of the other aspects of freedom that are in America. But the idea that you want a borderless meritocracy so that people can run their firms as they see fit is a narrow understanding of what freedom means and what even meritocracy means, because you're talking about bringing in the best Americans. You're not talking about bringing in the best engineers. You're talking about bringing in the best Americans. So if that's what we're talking about, we need to have the hard conversation about what it is to merit being the best American. And that doesn't necessarily mean being the best coder. Because if you're going to be a coder but then anti-union, you could keep your ass back in Seoul. like because you are a defective American, even if you are a very good, worker for Hyundai or whatever. Right. So that's what we need to talk about, like what constitutes the best. And the woke right at least gets this in some way, because they understand that they shouldn't have to compete with non-Americans, and also we can grow American talent here, and that there is American talent here, and that the American talent here is American talent, not just good, narrow soul talent. Right? So if you want a meritocracy, you can have a meritocracy or you can have a political democracy that upholds freedom in all of its forms. But I'm not convinced you can have both. Because if you want a meritocracy without borders, you want a market meritocracy without borders, you have to let any American company hire anyone they want and then bring them over here and then hope that doesn't screw up merit. Because first of all, you have to understand that, like, in terms of meritocracy, some of these Latin American pickers of berries that's a skill, and that's a skill that I don't have. I don't pick as fast as I would need to. So if you're just trying to peg merit to the needs of a private corporation and then extend visas based on merit without any other consideration, like, you need to let in a lot of Latin American pickers, and pretty much all of the people, like, not all the people, but you need to let in the people we think of as unskilled and illegal labor, and then slap a visa on them, because it turns out that they're very skilled, because I can't do what they do. Or we could just reorganize our economy so that we can pay those people to pick up the skills. You can pay me to pick out in the fields, and you can talk about wage subsidies for certain industries and all of these other things that'll pay people for doing the jobs that we think we need to hire out of America to do. Right? So if you appreciate what I'm saying, which I think you should, go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, because I think, like I said, with Trump being president, and the right is full of ideas. The right is full of ideas, good and bad. And if we let the right have all of the ideas, then all political talk will just start drifting more and more right, and we're looking at a GOP majority forever, which may or may not be good, but I want a more robust politics than that. And so you're going to need the quality of ideas that I'm producing rather regularly. Because I'll tell you this right now, the civil war between the tech MAGA and the ethno-nationalist MAGA, that's good for the GOP. That's good for the GOP because it brings everyone over to their side, especially if the Dems are thin about the issue. And when I say thin about the issue, they'll say something like open borders, or of course, obviously there's no problem with H-1B visas. So it's going to be like Roe v. Wade, where like the GOP comes up with a compromise, and the Democrats are just left out. So we need to say that, look, we need to actually think about merit. What does merit mean in America? Because if you're talking about importing foreigners into America, we need to talk about merit not necessarily as a private factor as a private function for a firm with their particular interest. We need to talk about merit as Americans. So are we bringing in the best Americans? And the best Americans may grow our GDP, but the best Americans may not grow our GDP. They may grow our culture. And we don't want to bring in Americans who may grow our GDP, but also screw up our culture, because we don't eat GDP. GDP isn't in my bank account. We're like, people don't live on aggregate. So we need to bring in Americans who are best Americans, not just best in their narrow particular field that might be good for the private interest of an Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy. Right? So like we need to have like that conversation about bringing in people based on merit. We need to talk about their merit as Americans, not just their merit as, engineers. And that's a conversation we can have, but we don't want to cede that conversation over to the right as we give some sort of, vacuous kind of pablum about how, well, we open our borders to everyone and immigrants built this country. Well, yes and no. There's some people who came over on boats who might have something to say about that and who still haven't been made right. Because like I said, I don't care how well you code, if you come here and then talk about how we need to get rid of affirmative action or anything, or like black people don't deserve reparations, and they just need to work harder, then you need to get your ass back to wherever you came from. Like, I don't like you need to get rid of that. So, I did see something interesting that one of the woke right wrote about how his grandfather served in World War II and should, and so, that should mean something with respect to his kids getting a job over, someone from, Calcutta. And, that actually should, in a way, it should mean something, because he fought for World War II for a better country for his grandkids. He didn't fight for World War II for his grandkids to get outcompeted by someone who doesn't have to deal with American issues. Right? So the woke right actually backdoors in lineage concerns. And I think the best way from here to reparations is going to go through lineage, not race, because race gets confused with a lot of other issues. It should go through lineage, because I think there are specific harms that have been done to Black American descendants of slaves. And it's realized in them not having the quality of parenting that they should have had. So their families are not what they should be, because their families were targeted as a matter of both slavery and Jim Crow. And for the most part, black parents have never been able to dictate and determine what their children will be. During Jim Crow, it was always a fear of if I give my children too many ideas, they might go off and get lynched. Or they might go off to fight a war and then come back with too many ideas, so I have to worry about that. Black people have never had control of their family lives. In the way that the stereotypical white mom was at home with her kids. Stereotypical black mom, instead of being at home with her kids, was cleaning up the white woman's house, right? So black women have always worked. So we've never had the family that we were supposed to have. And don't let anybody romanticize Jim Crow about the black family. Yeah, they were married, but they were still overdetermined in ways that are horrifying. The book Trouble in Mind goes over this. Not on purpose, but it just kind of goes over about how, black families wanted aspirations for their kids and did everything right, but then some external factor, and that external factor usually wore a hood, would screw up the dreams. And actually, Paul Laurence Dunbar's book, Sport of the Gods, it's a nice little novel written in 1903, but it's beautiful prose, and it's short. It's like 90 pages, goes through this very well. Yeah. We have to actually talk about, a lot of people get flattered, and a lot of black people get flattered into pretending that our families are not as screwed up as they are, or that we got the parenting that we deserved. Everybody black deserves the quality of parenting I give my kids. That's one of the reasons why I do this. I mean, you can go like, everyone black deserves the quality of parenting I give my kids. Very few people black get the quality of parenting I get my kid. I deserve my kids. The median, recent Indian immigrant parent is like doing a pretty good job, because the median recent Indian immigrant parent only got here, half generation ago, when we fixed America after the civil rights movement, did a good job fixing America. And we just need to understand that black people in the United States don't have the families that they deserve because they were targeted. And if you're not going to admit that, then that's a problem. Someone says, white women were cleaning houses too. What color was the maid on Brady Bunch? Alice didn't have kids. Oh, I don't think you understand. Black women have always worked. When white women aspired to the work optional life, black women just knew that they would always work. Right? So, thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, which I think you should, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com. The woke right is saying that you can have a meritocracy within America because they know that whites have a strategic advantage within America. But if they actually believed in meritocracy, there'd be meritocracy without borders. But meritocracy without borders isn't actually consistent with democracy, and both self-government and a constitutional democracy where all of the blessings of freedom are supposed to be sustained, because a meritocracy without borders isn't even consistent with, freedom of the family, because a meritocracy without borders will bring in low-wage workers or workers who will work forever, and if you have to compete with them in civil society, that means you're not spending the quality of family time that you need. So a meritocracy without borders is going to screw up your property holdings, because it may either artificially depress or artificially inflate property values. It's going to screw up your family, because a meritocracy without borders screws up the labor market, which is how you're going to support your family. So it screws up the quality of time you can spend with your family and your disposable income. It's going to screw up civil society, obviously, because now you have to compete with workers from other nations. And it'll screw up your politics, because we don't check their politics when they come here. Right? We don't check their politics when they come here, and that's a problem. So if you care about democracy, if you care about securing the blessings of all the forms of freedom, and not just the one freedom which is real, but only one kind of freedom, which is the employer's freedom to run their business how they fit, hiring the talent and bringing them over to the work site as they see fit. If you care about more kinds of freedom than that, you have to understand that meritocracy and democracy might not actually coincide, unless you want to define merit in this situation as who is the best American. But that's a political decision that shouldn't be decided on the criteria of one person's or one firm's bottom line. Right? For example, I think the real model minority is Shawa Sawant, the woman from Seattle. It's a fascinating story, because she's pretty cool and pretty left, and very first generation Indian, and I'd be interested. I've had a brief talk with her, and I liked what I heard when I talked with her, but I'd like to have a sit down with her and just kind of chat. If anybody knows her, put her in touch with me. Send her this video. Tell her I want to talk with her. Shama Sawant. up in Seattle. So, yeah, thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, go to www.funkyacademic.com. Kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. And we need to have the conversation about what states are for. States are like Americans owe Americans jobs, like healthcare. Americans owe these things to Americans as a self-governing on Americans' terms. We don't owe them to everybody else. If we care about them, we should help them with their states, their self-governing states. Americans don't owe anybody else, and like non-Americans, like rights. Rights are social and political institutions, and like we need to help them build their own social and political institutions. I don't know who needs to tell you that, or if we're going to help them at all, but we need to understand that like nobody's entitled to an American job any more than they're entitled to an American healthcare, like to healthcare in America. Like that's not how rights work. Not in the United States, but also in general. So we need to build institutions around the world that allow the states of the world to determine how they're going to meet the needs of the people in the states of the world. But American institutions are for Americans. Thank you for your time. And I will talk to you another time. Peace.